at the end of the day, I think it's really about understanding that many things are valued in running an effective business. But ultimately nowadays, especially with the customer, especially with the worker, there are some elements of the business that I think most people would describe as kind of softer elements, less rigid elements, are really the new they're the new tactics on the game board, and the game board has changed, and the game values different things, and it rewards different things, and in the game of business, you have to understand when the posts move.
Hi there, I'm Paul Silliman, and you're listening to the Restoration Playbook Podcast by KnowHow. Today we've got Leighton Healey back on to talk about even more ways today's leaders are winning with workers. We'll discuss how to connect work to meaning, how to democratize your how-to, and how to leverage tech on the job. Let's dive in. Leighton, how you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Yeah, doing really well. Things are moving and grooving, as they say. Moving and grooving, Paul. So moving and grooving, and it's been exciting to see the reception of the book, and it's exciting to see people respond that this is providing them with some guidance, some validation, helping them to see maybe some gaps. And so that's been really positive. So I would say I'm feeling pretty good.
I like it. Well, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. So, we're going to go through 3 chapters of the book today. The first one we'll dive into is our chapter 5, which is, connecting work to meaning. Winning with Workers talks about how younger generations want to have meaning in the work they do. I'm curious, why do you think they want to make a difference at work, and kind of what's changed over the years?
So the book is focused on these 8 principles. And so principles, we chose the word principles very specifically, because a lot of things change. This industry, it changes a lot. I can just tell you from someone who hasn't been in this industry for 30 years. Even in the time I've been in the industry, there are some things that have changed, and they're meaningful changes. But principles are things that we can look to as, in a sense, kind of largely immovable structures on the horizon that we can use to orient our life and make decisions based on. And I often think about, being out at sea in the middle of the night as a sailor exploring the world, and I look up and you see these stars that are largely, set fixtures in the night, and people would use those to make navigational decisions. And so principles are kind of along the same vein. So within the book, the third principle that we talk about is, if you want to win with workers today, you have to learn how to bridge the gap between, how I earn my money and really how I experience meaning and fulfillment in my life. And so your question is, what's going on with these workers that they have such a high expectation for work? And there's a lot of things going on, Paul. I'll list a few. One is that you have increased exposure, and so the average young person, just in their devices, in online, in the news, in TV, in just popular culture, we're exposed to a lot more examples of what life can be like than a lot of previous generations. And so at the end of the day, there is just a greater awareness that, sometimes when a person grows up in a small town and they don't have a lot of access with the outside world, they come around and they kind of gooseneck as they, drive through the city, and they're like, wow, I didn't know buildings could be that big, or I didn't know that, you could have so many people on one street. Well, even people from a small town today can watch a movie or watch a live stream and recognize that the world is different. And so people have more exposure. I think that's one of the first things, and they bring that exposure forms expectations, and those expectations come with them to work. I think the second thing is that people, I would say, when you think about what characterizes a lot of the social exchanges with young people, work is a very important thing to young people. They're trying to find their way, Paul. They're trying to, we all accept that finding a job is an important part of coming to maturity. And, a lot of young people are taking on financial responsibilities, whether they're small things like making a car payment, or they're big things like they're responsible for a young family. And so with that, it begins to dominate a lot of their social conversations. And so nowadays, everyone wants to be able to say things that are buzzworthy and important. And I think that people ultimately talk about their work in a way that previous generations may not have, in the way that other generations might, you leave work at work and then you talk about your hobbies, you talk about sports. I think a lot of people, work really dominates a lot of the headlines in their social discussions. And so that is a factor as well. And then, you can't discount the fact that the Gen Z worker, I believe, has been heavily influenced by, a number of big factors, Paul. Number one, the Gen Z worker was deeply impacted by the COVID pandemic. And we can get into that if you want. They were also really impacted by the advent of mobile technology. They were very impacted by just what they've seen, kind of how they've seen their parents' lives roll out. Most Gen Zs, their parents are like what we call kind of early stage Gen Xs. And one of the defining characteristics of Gen X has been there's been generally a lot of dissatisfaction in their careers. You can get into how the demographers talk about that, but in a nutshell, they were promised a lot in a sense from the world. They were a very educated workforce, the Gen Xs. So you have Gen Z, you have millennial, then you have Gen X. So quick age brackets. Millennials, Gen Zs are age 8 to 24. Millennials are ages 25 to 40. Some will say maybe 43. And then you've got Gen Xs who are kind of in that like 53 to 43. I'll say like 41 to 53. And so most Gen Z's parents are Gen Xs. Okay. And so the Gen X generation has had a big influence. And by and large, a common characteristic of Gen Xs has been that they've been relatively distant, I would say somewhat like they haven't been really flattered with their career choices and work. It hasn't given them the fulfillment. So I think young people coming into the workplace have seen that, Paul, and they recognize that they don't want that. They don't want to be kind of a grouchy, miserable person who lives vicariously through their sports and hobbies and sports icons, right? So, that's maybe more meat than you thought you were going to bite off there, but that's probably some of the reasons why they come to work wanting to achieve deeper meaning and fulfillment in the workplace than other generations.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I know my parents, they worked certain jobs for so long, even if there's friction or it's not something that's fulfilling, this is your job, this is what you do it. And like something you mentioned, in today's day and age with technology, work tends to follow you home if you let it. The phone never stops ringing, emails never stop coming through. So it's easy to be, at your fingertips at all time. It's not as easy as it once was, where when you physically left the office, you left work behind. And that kind of leads into a good question I have here as well for you, which in a recent episode with Chuck Lane, the VP of Learning and Development at BluSky Restoration, he discussed the misconceptions that, the restoration industry isn't a, worthwhile career choice for young workers. We'll play the clip for him here now for us.
We kind of told a whole generation of kids that you don't even get to look at certain jobs, whether it was auto shop, metal shop, wood shop, all these different things. We kind of told people for a while that these jobs aren't worth looking at. They're not worth getting into. And now we're seeing this huge gap, in the trades, right? And we know realistically, right, like these are the jobs that make the world go round. Like these are truly important jobs that people should be embracing and learning about and at least looking at as viable options, but as a career, right? And that's the thing about, I think, where we're at a kind of a rough point in our history right now with everything, kind of pre-COVID, post-COVID, and a lot of people have talked about this shift in what people want from their lives. And I think most people now really want to say, I want to be a part of something. I want to be about something a little bit bigger than myself. I need a purpose, right?
And, so Leighton, what I'm wondering is, how can today's restoration companies showcase the positive impacts to attract potential hires? Because this is an industry that really at the core of it, you're helping people on a lot of cases, their worst day.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of it, Paul, my perspective is a lot of it goes back to how have we been promoting ourselves as restorers to the marketplace. And a lot of that has been influenced by the very practical business advice, which is, the way you display and you promote your company should be directed towards, the needs and wants of your customers. And up until now, a lot of customers have been saying, who is the most qualified, who has the most capacity to deal with my needs. And that has characterized a lot of how these companies have tried to promote themselves and position themselves in the market. And so all you need to do is, type restoration over an American city, click on 2 or 3 Google links, and you'll see 4 out of 5 companies, their top Google picture is just, we own 15 vans that all have our branding on it, right? And that was part of how we would promote ourselves as we're a company that has capacity and has the resources to support you in a time of crisis. That doesn't appeal to a worker who's thinking about doing an interview with that company and who could care less about, really how we do the work. They're really more interested in if I'm going to invest 12 months or 24 months or 36 months of my life in this company, what am I going to have to show for it? Like, ultimately, what am I going to have to bring back to that Saturday night conversation with my friends? And at the end of the day, I think Chuck and his team at BluSky, they do many things really well. And one of the things that they do well is that they are open to changing their perspective and thinking about how do we as an organization, as large as BluSky is, how do we try to stay nimble and responsive to the market? And what the market and what the worker wants today is they want to be able to know that when they come home from work and that loved one asks them, how was your day and how do you feel about how your day went? They want to be able to say, I really think I made a difference today. And that matters to young workers today. It matters because so much of popular culture today tells them that that life is short, it's fragile, and you need to make a difference with your life. And those aren't bad. I think adages to kind of hang your hat on. I think that just what many companies are struggling with, Paul, is simply. Is it my responsibility to help you find meaning in your life? And that's what they're saying. Instead of saying, hey, every day of the week, like, we help people out of their worst day. I guess I just haven't really thought about positioning it to someone who's sitting across the interview table as, rather than saying, okay, I don't want this guy or this gal quitting 30 days in, so I'm just going to let them know how intense it is and just keep kind of like just giving them the old side eye to say, you're still here? You're still here? I'm going to tell you the story about when things really went wrong. You're still here? You're still here? And that kind of pressure test-based interviewing that characterizes a lot of companies' approach to trying to weed out the weak, it's not necessary anymore. And it doesn't, I would say, really, identify the candidates who I think could be great workers. What it does is it probably just identifies people who just have exhausted their options and you're their last option. So whatever you're going to say, they're going to say yes to. So at the end of the day, what we recommend, Paul, is workers today do want to do work that they feel a sense of pride in. They feel like they could talk to their peers with their head held high. And there probably is an element where people want to feel a little self-righteous, but at the end of the day, think about this. Like, forget about the term restoration. If I was just to paint a picture for you where, you and I, Paul, are interviewing a candidate and they come into the office and I welcome them there. And then rather than, talking to them about mold for 5 minutes or talking about the last job we come off, I just come in and I just say, how much do you know about the impact we have in people's lives? I mean, an applicant will be like, I know very little. Well, let me start by actually telling you the story of just 3 families that we helped last week. And it's important to me that you understand the lives we touch. And then you just tell just a couple quick, allegories of, a couple stories and what happened and what that disruption cost them in their life, and how it meant that, an important family event had to be rescheduled, or something that was important to them got really thrown off, and how through the efforts of their team, they were able to bring that person's life out of a spiral of chaos, reestablish them, and be able to help them to kind of return to a place of order in their lives. And a candidate will be so taken back, they'll think that they're being interviewed for like a firefighting position, right? Or maybe like one of those opportunities to go like hand out, shoebox gifts in like sub-Saharan Africa. They're like, oh, hold on a second here. I thought this was like my buddy told me to get a job here, and they said it's going to be a real grind. I said, well, of course it is. That's a means to an end. But the end, make no mistake, is that we really get to help people. And one of the things we talk about in the book, Paul, and then I'll put it back to you. But one of the things we talk about in the book is that, when a person joins your team, and in that interview, it's so important that you show them a path to impact in the first 30 days. No question you want them to be competent in your equipment and your tools and your services, but you need to say, look, you've got options out there in the market, but if you choose to work with us, I can guarantee you that in a month from today, you're going to look back with a sense of pride with the names of different homeowners and different humans that you could actually bump into on the street someday, and have people that express thanks and appreciation to you, and who you are the topic of dinner discussion 2 months from now, where they just talk about how essential you were in a moment of chaos in their lives. You put that in front of a candidate, and I think the beauty of it is you can say that sincerely, and it's just really about, I think, peeling off some of the calloused layers that can come along with being in this industry for a long time, and getting to the heart of the matter, and then just putting that on the table for a candidate. And you know what, Paul? Some are going to say, yeah, that's not really what I'm looking for. But others are going to say, man, am I glad that I took this interview? What do you think?
I think if there's any restoration companies listening to this, if there's anything you take away from this podcast, it's how are you positioning your company to those new hires? Because I've been in a couple places where it's exactly like you said. We'll give you 2 weeks. If you're still here in 2 weeks, let's talk. We're going to run you through the grind. But being able to present, what's your vision? How do we go about and impact people's lives is something that is a great selling point that seems to be overlooked. How are you actually giving an impact on your community and really kind of open up that person's eyes to the industry that you're coming into, instead of, well, we'll just kind of grind it out. If you're here, we'll see. Because let's be honest, we're not setting anyone up for success with that approach. Mm-hmm. So I think that's extremely powerful, and it's overlooked, and is something that every restoration company has. That's what you do. It's something that you can make one shift and one change in that interview, and it might make all the difference in the world. Plus, you find those people that connect to that. Those are the people that want to come and make a difference. So it might help you distinguish between different candidates as well.
It makes me think of a recent conversation I had where I was, there was a gentleman who's been a subcontractor. He's been thinking about trying to get his own business going, and he said, I've just been having trouble getting it going, and I asked him, I said, what do you think is the obstacle? And there was different obstacles, but one obstacle is, he said, I'm such a craftsman with what I do, and it was pretty clear that this individual takes so much pride in the workmanship that he does, but it gets lost in just fictitious conversations with customers, and nobody wants to work for him because he's really picky, and he can be really prickly, and that's a picture of so many companies today, where don't mishear me, like workmanship and quality of work is vital to doing the job. But at the end of the day, I think we can all agree that and this is kind of an old adage, but whatever you recognize, you're really going to get more of. And if all you're recognizing is workmanship and all of your pictures is, look at how good we got our, containment chamber walls up and all these different things online. I mean, at the end of the day, that's important, no question. But what it's communicating to the outside world is that, workmanship is what matters most and not impact. The workmanship is important, but make no mistake, the workmanship is a means to an end. It's not the end in itself. We don't put up these walls and then send an invoice to an insurance company. We bring this home back to a place of order, and then once those containment chambers are either in the garbage can or who knows, maybe you're reusing them or whatever. Well, long after they're off the site, we consider the job done. So at the end of the day, I think it's really about understanding that many things are valued in running an effective business. But ultimately nowadays, especially with the customer, especially with the worker, there are some elements of the business that I think most people would describe as kind of softer elements, less rigid elements, are really the new they're the new tactics on the game board, and the game board has changed. And the game values different things, and it rewards different things. And in the game of business, you have to understand when the posts move, right? And the posts are moving. And I like to tell business owners, what are you more committed to? Are you more committed to your perspective, your way of doing it, or winning? Just choose one, right? And for people that want to win, all I would say is, the game has changed, and the game has changed, and the worker has changed, and the customer has changed, and those macro waves are so much bigger and more powerful than your entrenched way of doing things.
No, that's dynamite insights there, and that's speaking to change. Nice segue into our next chapter. This is something that we see a lot with. This is something that's near and dear to both our hearts. Is our next principle we're going to dive into is how to democratize how to. Restoration leaders are using different ways to help win with their workers and really kind of getting that how-to information out there. Kind of in this essence, that means they're making expertise and knowledge accessible to everyone. What impact does this have on employees and management when they have that information?
When workers have quick and easy answers to solve the problems that they encounter on the job site, they feel empowered, they feel confident, they feel like the company prioritizes them, they feel like they are able to properly care for a customer. They feel that they aren't left out to dry in situations where they're the least experienced person on the site or in the office. I mean, and the list goes on, right? And the list goes on. Let me maybe share like a micro history nugget. It wasn't that many years ago, sitting on a pier in San Francisco, two of the founders of KnowHow, myself and another much more handsome gentleman than myself, were sitting there, and we were just thinking about the future of what is now KnowHow, and we both had a passion for two things. One is that we had a passion for work. We both enjoy work, and we think work fundamentally was really designed to be something that is meaningful and can be a source of fulfillment in a person's life. But the other thing that we found just very compelling, Paul, is study after study, by respected organizations, showed that that by and large, the largest employment sectors in North America, namely service sectors, trade services, field-based services, consistently scored amongst the lowest in terms of job satisfaction. And when you kind of like pull back, just kind of just push, pull back the kimono, as they might say, and say, well, what's going on here? Routinely, what you see is staff complaining about frustration and disappointment in the workplace resulting from two big things. One being, it's just hard for me to be able to know if I did a good job today. And so I go home without even knowing if I did things well, because I don't actually get any feedback unless I screw something up. And then the other thing is that I just tragically have a adversarial relationship with my supervisor. And let's just stand up for supervisors for a moment. Supervisors that are the sole source of how everything's supposed to be done. They are the standard of how things are supposed to be done. And there's one of them for 20 people where there shouldn't be, there should actually be one for maybe 5. They're tired, they're burned out, they're sick of being the golden standard, they're sick of being the frequently asked question machine. And so, yeah, they're a little snappy. They're a little snappy in their responses, right? And so the root of all of that is that the way to do things should be clear, it should be easy to access, and it should be available to everyone. And what we know is that when that's done, it eliminates the two most commonly stated reasons why service-based workers are disgruntled and frustrated at work. It's just simply that they feel disempowered to be able to solve even simple problems at work without having that little just thorn in the back of their mind saying, am I going to get chewed out, right? And so democratizing work is critical to winning with workers because, number one, it eliminates one of the main causes of stress and friction and what we would call societal rust in your workforce, which is just, I'm sick and tired of feeling like an idiot every day and feeling like I have to kind of tiptoe around decisions before I just kind of creep into my supervisor's office or try to get them on their phone and then put them in a scenario where once again, they have to re-explain something that to them is quite basic, but to the worker is still unclear. And so, that was the democratizing the way things are supposed to get done. It matters because it's one of the main reasons why a lot of people go home disappointed with their work, right? When I say most people, because over 67% of employed humans in North America are in service-based work. So most people in North America go home having had a bad day at work because they either felt like an idiot, they didn't know what a good job looked like, or they had a fictitious engagement with their manager who's just because that manager honestly just has too much coming at them. And so, democratizing how to is super, super important. So important that, we commit our time and know how to solve it.
And on that point, can you provide our listeners with some tangible strategies and methods to transition away from that one subject matter expert model and towards a more effective knowledge sharing approach?
Yeah, well, hey, we're talking about this book, Winning with Workers. Why Workers Quit was our last book, Winning with Workers. And, you go to winningwithworkers.com, get a free copy of the book. And the way we wrote this book, Paul, is we at the close of each chapter, what we did is we took time to identify a list of things that you can stop doing, things that you can start doing, and ultimately things that you can invest in. And so really, I would just draw from the book. I mean, one of the first things that we would say stop doing if you want to become a company that democratizes how to do things around the company is we would say stop praising non-scalable ways of sharing knowledge. A person, maybe a manager walks into a meeting and they say, hey, sorry, I'm a few minutes late. I got stuck on a call with Carl. Everyone knows Carl. And he still hasn't figured out how to get those machines working. But hey, I took some time and I walked him through it. And everyone's like, good job. You're really caring. You really go over and above. No, in fact, what they did is they created a dependent relationship that, you do not have the resources to solve the problem on your own. So you got to call someone, interrupt their schedule to get things back online. It's better to say, how often do you take those types of calls? And most of the time, those really smart people will say with an air of almost like just confidence. They'll say, I take those calls a lot. I try to be available to my team, and all I see, Paul, as a business builder, especially a business builder aware of what's going on in the workforce today, is just a manager with like 57 umbilical cords tied to them, and they create deep levels of dependence on their staff, and it becomes a big part of their identity at work, and frankly their value at work is that my guys couldn't go a day without me, right? And you know what? That's a dangerous cocktail. It's a dangerous cocktail for so many reasons. And so we say, stop praising non-scalable ways of knowledge sharing. Put that person in a room and commit them to capturing, the 10 to 12 most common questions that they encounter on a daily basis, and put them in a format that that today's workers are familiar with and are comfortable using, and help that person transition from a walking, talking question and answer machine to more of a performance coach, like someone who helps people navigate kind of gray areas that aren't as kind of black and white. And frankly, it's more rewarding for everybody. But the first thing that we would say, Paul, is don't reward those non-scalable ways of sharing knowledge.
No, I think that's tremendous insight, because especially, I've worked with people who put their value in being that frequently asked question person. Like, that was their value. Mm-hmm. If I'm not here, who's going to answer the question? This is kind of my calling to be here, but really their job role doesn't have anything to do with that. Or, their compensation package comes from actually doing their revenue producing job, but they're spending time being this person that's, I'm always available, I'm here for questions, but then they're also at the office till 8:30 at night trying to catch up on what their primary responsibilities are. And it's in a day and age where we have cell phones, we have the ability of sharing information, it's really driving down that value, not building up like they think. And I think that's something that, we're seeing less of, but also being able to share that information, being able to find possibly a better way of doing something. We're not set in our ways. And as anyone in restoration knows, there's new, ways of doing things, new equipment, new, best practices for speaking with homeowners and adjusters. And if you're set in that one way, you're not going to be able to grow and scale. So I think you captured a lot on that one, on just really helping that person do their job better, but also really how do we eliminate some of that friction and stress as well?
And one thing I'll just say really briefly, Paul, is many people have bought into the idea that technology has improved my accessibility when it's really supposed to improve your scalability, right? And what I mean by that is, just because the phone is constantly on your belt or in your pocket, a person could say, that means that technology has made you accessible always. When in reality, technology is really more about enhancing, adding productivity, adding scalability to your workforce. And so, no question, access is something technology provides, but it's really only one of multiple pillars that the technology is supposed to support us with. And I think we over-rely on it. We over-rely on just how accessible technology makes us, as opposed to saying, hey, technology's got a lot more moves than just access, right? And thinking about how you democratize the way you do things is starting to think about, what else can we lean on technology to help us with? One of the things we say start doing, if you want to start being a company who democratizes, how to, is we say, look, and this is one of the most important things that you can do, is discover how your incoming workers, particularly young workers, right? Workers that are, let's say like 18 to 30, right? Discover how they solve complicated, multifaceted, knowledge-based problems when they're not at work, because they're already doing it. They're solving, again, either complex recipes or swapping out parts on a vehicle with no mechanical training, or they're making ancient grain bread, or they're figuring out, a new technology. And again, they're figuring it out using technology. And so I always say, whatever you land on as the way that you equip your staff with the way you want them to do their job and how you want them to solve problems, look no further than how people use primarily mobile devices to solve knowledge-based problems outside of work. Because when you're trying to get people to adopt a way of solving knowledge-based problems at work, you're really trying to overcome something we call the six mountains. And one of those mountains is simply, will my team actually use this solution? And so I say the best way to ensure that a solution is utilized is to mimic a behavior in which they currently exhibit, in which it's a known behavior to solve a particular challenge. And so that's why at KnowHow we're so bullish on taking the best of how knowledge-based technology has advanced in the consumer space primarily, and bring that into industries like restoration and mirror those experiences to remove the friction of adoption. And but that's a key thing, Paul, is that if you're going to take this seriously, you have to start thinking about how not just how do I document the content. That's table stakes, right? Not just, how do I give it to my workers in a way where it's trustworthy and reliable and it's been vetted. Table stakes is really now about how do I give it to them in a format that is familiar. Because I've said this before, companies like Google and Facebook and I guess Meta now, Amazon and companies like that, they spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year paying thousands and thousands of software engineers to just modify the way that the average consumer thinks about using technology to solve knowledge problems. And so why not just harness all the hard work that they're doing and equip your staff with a familiar way of solving problems?
No, you hit it right on the head. I think that's, let someone else, there's already solving those issues, so let's just use that advice and the way they do it and put it in your workers' hands. We'll be back with Leighton in a moment, but first, a word on KnowHow. KnowHow is an intuitive, mobile-first application designed to rapidly onboard new hires, upskill staff, and provide on-demand expert guidance for whatever task is next. Home to your company's proven methods, KnowHow ensures everyone has the skills they need to get the job done right. With time-saving features that make it a breeze for management to build, maintain, and translate standard operating procedures. It's time to ditch your outdated operation binders and dated, difficult-to-search systems. With KnowHow in their pocket, your staff have the how-to they need wherever the day takes them. Our new process creator makes drafting new SOPs faster than ever, helping you customize, edit, and share your time-tested methods and processes with ease. And back to Leighton. Let's dive into principle number 5, mobilize a bionic workforce. So can you explain to me what the term bionic worker means?
I mean, bionic, I think when we say bionic, we all think of some movie that we watched where some, robotic arm was bolted onto a soldier and they became, some type of, sci-fi super soldier. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is how do you enhance a worker with technology? Someone that I like to read has often said that, we're already cyborgs in a sense because we're so reliant on our cell phones. It's called the Google effect. The Google effect is this idea that when information is so easy to access, that actually our minds unconsciously just begin, investing less time and less energy in committing things to memory. So in many ways, many of us are already bionic in a sense. Bionic meaning the pairing of technology with something organic. And obviously, we're organic beings, humans, And so what we're talking about in mobilizing a bionic workforce, what we're saying is fully embracing technology And, I think about, this may be a silly example, but some listeners might connect with it. A lot of my roots are kind of farm town, the equivalent of the Canadian Midwest, say the word Saskatchewan 10 times and see if you can, not smile. But I come from, that part of the Great White North. And I've got a cousin of mine who's a very successful farmer. I remember asking him, I said, his name's Jason. I said, Jason, tell me a little bit about what makes you so successful, because you're so much more successful than the average farmer. And he said, and he always says it the same thing. Wow, I mean, I'm just a dumb farmer. But which as soon as someone says I'm just a dumb farmer, they're probably loaded, right? And so after he's, made some self-deprecating comments, he said, one of the things we do is there's a lot of technology now in the industry. In the equipment that we run, with satellite technology and plotting and GPS, and I've just really, really committed myself to try to get at least 85 to 90% of the horsepower out of this technology. And he said, I think the average farmer probably gets maybe 18 to 20%. And he said, that's one of the things I do. I just get more horsepower out of the tools because I've just embraced it's just the way that we do agriculture. And I think that that's very similar to companies that have learned how to mobilize a bionic workforce. They don't look at technology as an unfortunate reality that's mandated by a carrier. They don't think about technology as one more thing that's kind of a paper cut to their bottom line each month. They've been very selective, very, very intentional in how they pair technology with their workforce to enhance and to add productivity. But an angle, Paul, that many people don't consider is that technology is one of the most powerful tools to attract and retain young workers today. I think that a worker who's coming out of retail or maybe coming out of fast food, maybe coming out of some department store, which our data has showed that nearly 60% of new people walking into the restoration business came from non-general construction roles. So these are people who are literally walking from environments that haven't spent a lot of time on a job site. And when people are attracted to these kind of salt of the earth industries, TV has kind of told everyone that you want to learn how to flip a castle, when you get a little older and, turn a barn into a design studio, some reality show. But they also like technology. And when you can pair this, you can have that essential experience of working with your hands and, seeing the fruit of your labor at the end of your day. Pair that with technology, it appeals to young workers. It reinvigorates staff when you bring cutting edge technology, not kind of like just kind of the B class stuff, but you bring really cutting edge technology into your workforce. It reinvigorates your team. And when you invest in understanding how to get the most horsepower out of it, you can get amazing results with technology today. So that's what we mean by Bionic. We mean enhance your people with technology, and I can speak more to that, but that's what we mean.
And I'm the first one to raise my hand. I came in the restoration industry having no idea what restoration was. I was managing a retail store. I was working cutting grass on soccer fields. I had no clue what it was, but I had a buddy who said, "You're already working 100 hours. Why not make overtime and work 100 hours here?" Now, did I realize he actually meant 100 hours, which it was? Not at the time, but most people come in not knowing what to do after a loss. And, from my own experience working in the field, I can tell you there's a lot of workers that, don't like to use technology in their day-to-day. Now, especially in this industry, because not long ago, if you had a mold loss, you just simply sprayed some bleach, you floated some carpets, we're good to go. Well, technology is advanced and it's changed for the better. So, how can today's companies really encourage these potential, tech-adverse employees to adopt this change?
Generally, when somebody is tech-adverse, I would say you've got to kind of peel back the onion a little bit. I would say the first layer, when you reach resistance of people bringing technology in, let's just unpack the reasons why people are technology adverse. Number one, there's just the generational workforce. We work in a multi-generational workforce nowadays. We have the most generations represented in the workforce today than arguably ever before. at least in recorded history, meaning that you can have in a single crew, you could have a Gen X, someone who's, under 25 and under, someone who's a millennial, 25 to 40, someone who's a Gen Xer, and all the way up, and you could have a baby boomer, in that you could have all in one workforce, in one crew, you can have multiple generations represented. Each generation has a different level of familiarity with technology. That's the result of just, again, how technology entered into the landscape of their life. And so where you have some people on a crew that they can't even think of a time without internet, and others, they remember when they got their first fax machine, and others remember when they got their first television, right? So when you think that cocktail is delivering the same water loss project, no question, you're going to have differing opinions on adopting technology. But as most sociologists that study technology will tell you, that interestingly, it's not actually the most senior people in a company that have the most influence on technology adoption. Actually, the incoming workforce introduces preferences for technology, and those preferences, like a groundswell, influence the rest of the organization. It's almost like a counterintuitive groundswell effect that happens with technology, meaning that a young person comes home from school, they're excited about Instagram, mom wants to make sure that she's not posting the wrong photos, so she gets on Instagram. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't work in reverse. It's not like a wise mom said, I've been thinking hard about how do I keep an eye on my daughter, so I searched the internet for a social application that allows me to post pictures of my dessert, right? It's a reverse. So the same thing happens in companies. So people are reluctant to adopt technology because of generational reasons. People are reluctant to adopt technology when the boss or the leadership team didn't stick the landing implementing a previous product, and they think it's just going to be another cluster bomb that goes off that just creates more pain than good. People are resistant to technology when technology that's being when they've been choosing kind of, let's call it second tier technology solutions instead of really going for best in class. And so they know that there's a better solution, but they got this deal, and so they brought it in. People are resistant to technology, I would say, when it's not reflective of the application or what we'd say the operating system preferences of their company. If everyone in the company, if every single worker has an iPhone and they pick up a technology that only runs on Android, I mean, you're gonna hit resistance. If somebody says, yeah, we picked up this new piece of technology, but it only runs on a physical computer, it's not a cloud-based technology, again, you're going to hit a lot of resistance. So there's a lot of reasons why people are resistant to technology. When you want to get your staff to become, this enhanced workforce, I would say you just have to be mindful of what are the very reasonable, make sense, I totally get it, roadblocks to adopting technology, and just avoid those landmines.
One thing you mentioned earlier was, the farmer seeing a lot of technological change through his life. And as technology continues to advance, especially in restoration, because it's a very there's a lot of moving parts. You're doing psychrometric readings, you have cubic footage. How do you see that implementing the future of training in the restoration industry and career development?
Well, I think that what most people are very aware of is that if they are not using technology to, say, train and support and educate their staff, I think the day is gone where you're going to bump into someone who doesn't use technology to train and support their staff, and you were to explain to them that, did you know there's technology solutions that can help you to train your staff in a more scalable, more professional manner? I don't think that you're going to run into someone who says, say what? And they're going to be surprised. I think everybody knows that if they are using technology to train and support their staff, they're aware of it. If they're not, they're aware of someone who's doing it. So it's not about awareness anymore. I think that what a lot of people are not aware of is just how rapidly tools to train and support and guide staff, how rapidly that technology has advanced even in the last 18 months. Most training, for example, is written, and most of it's written in English. at least in the North American marketplace. And a lot of it is in video format. I think that what very few people are aware of is that technology nowadays can take what you've written, can take what you've filmed, can take what you've captured in audio and do amazing things with it that will just raise eyebrows across your workforce. And that's the world of generative artificial intelligence. And KnowHow is a leader in generative AI, pioneering just like eyebrow-raising solutions into the industry. So what I would say is that people know about it. They know their solutions, whether they're using them or not. What they may not know is how rapidly technology is advancing in enabling them to be able to, maybe they are a slow adopter or they haven't really got on board with digital training. I think most people will be amazed at once they get on board, once they decide to get on board with technology to support and train their staff, just how significant that training and support can be. And I think it would just blow their minds. So that's my thoughts.
And I think one thing you mentioned there that I want to kind of harp on is this isn't recreating the wheel. It's not saying, okay, we have this great training manual. Now we got to just throw it away and start from scratch. Take that information you have and supercharge it. Put it in a new format. It's not recreate our entire program from scratch. It's how do we put it in a different way that workers are used to seeing, really giving that ability to amplify it. And I see that as something, being able to get that in their hands and really using that technology to help make things easier, and really kind of driving that forward. And
sorry, Paul, but I think that really, if you were to say what should keep a listener up at night, the future of training and the future of worker support is going to be heavily influenced by organizations who have taken the time to document how they want things done. The vast majority of knowledge in this industry has been captured experientially, and it lives. People refer to it as like tribal knowledge. It lives in the minds of thousands of individuals who've given 20, 30 years to this industry, but they've never had any desire to write a manuscript, or to write their memoirs or to capture it. And that's the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is that most of how legacy industries like this one operate resides in the mind of certain individuals. And I think one of the biggest opportunities and one of the biggest risks that is facing the restoration industry is how will we ensure that the knowledge that has taken so long and there's been so much sweat, blood, and stress to accumulate that knowledge. How do we make sure that it doesn't just transition out of the industry in the minds of these hardworking individuals? How do we find a way to be able to capture it and then use technology to be able to enhance and really accelerate the incoming workforce, their experience? And so, we think about that a lot at KnowHow. We think about how do you make it easy for that subject matter expert, that in-house pro, to be able to move their knowledge into a format that is not only, I would say, preserves that knowledge base for the company that employed them, but it presents it in a format that is appealing and approachable and accessible to young workers and workers who prefer to read and work in different languages. That's how we think about it.
No, this has been great. Anyone who wants to get a copy, definitely head over to winningwithworkers.com. Download your free copy. Feel free to share it with your team. And Leighton, thank you for coming on. We're going to dive into a little bit more on another episode, but this has been extremely insightful, and I thank you for your time.
You're welcome, Paul.
Thanks for joining us today. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're hungry for more insights about the restoration industry, feel free to check out our past episodes or head to tryknowhow.com/resources for more data-driven insights from the KnowHow research team, including your own free digital copy of Winning with Workers, which breaks down all 8 proven principles with actionable advice tailored for restorers. If you want to hear more from Leighton, he'll be live on Wednesday, November 8th at 1 p.m. Eastern with Michelle Blevins of CNR Magazine to discuss the findings from the 2023 CNR State of the Industry. Check out the link in our show notes to save your spot and download your copy of the report at stateofrestoration.com. Thanks for listening, and again, take care out there.